Dear colleagues, welcome you all to our session within Gaidar Forum. Our expert panel is devoted to the discussion of economics of APEC and the technology development in these economies. Mr. Fomichev had to moderate this session, but unfortunately they are absent on very important state matters. My name is Ponomarenko and I'm going to replace them. I'm the Deputy of Strategy Development Department of Ministry of Economic Development, and my responsibility includes international relations, and I'm going to moderate our session today. These two presentations were planned from the moderators, from Mr. Fomichev and Mr. Shadrin. I'd like to brief you on what were the topics of these discussions, what are the goals of our initiatives within APEC, to make it more clear for you. As you may know, we have a few global strategic documents implemented in our country. One of the most important is the National Technological Initiative, and within this document there are a few roadmaps implemented which cover new markets, AutoNet, MariNet, AirNet, roadmaps related to the unmanned transport, FinNet, TechNet, SafeNet, cybersecurity, FoodNet, EnergyNet, distributed energy system. And besides that, the Ministry of Economic Development is realizing a few priority projects. In this building there was a big session on innovation territorial clusters. The ministry has a priority project to develop territorial clusters. There are 28 clusters in Russia in total, 12 leader clusters who are participants of our priority project. The clusters are operating in the area of biotechnology, nuclear energy, IT and telecom. They are dealing with machine building. These are network organizations which combine business and science and research and development. Plus, the second session was one of the central sessions in the central hall, was devoted to the priority project National Champions. This is a project to support fast-growing high-tech companies, and today you could witness the selection of the pool. 32 more companies were selected. These are big IT companies, companies producing new materials, are engaged in nano industry, mid-sized business, fast-growing companies. They're all oriented on the development. These priority projects, global initiatives, are focused on the development of the international relations to support these companies going for market, for technology transfer and exporting high-tech products. There are a few mechanisms developed for this end. This interagency commission, where on the bilateral level support and help is provided to enter different market. Trade representatives, we have around 60 representatives which provide support on entering the market for national champions and other companies to foreign markets. And separately, a project which we are going to discuss today is initiatives of the Ministry of Economic Development of Russian Federation, which were initially presented this year in the Asian Pacific Forum. These are initiatives to coordinate policies in the area of creation of new high-tech markets, to interact with clusters, and these are interactions with fast-growing companies. So we believe that apart from the mechanism which already implemented to support export, these three initiatives which have been initiated this year and are under development will become a high-level umbrella which will cover all these measures of support and which will allow us to be present in global markets, in markets of APEC economies. And I'd like to remind you that 21 countries are included in APEC economies. This is 60% of GDP, 40% of population. These means these are global markets, and the initiatives are, by realizing such initiatives, will provide us additional opportunity to present information of ourselves to our colleagues, that we have a high-tech businesses, innovation clusters, which are suffering under pressure. They are suffering in this crowded market of 3%. They have unique knowledge, unique competencies, and they need to move on. They need to develop, and this is the goal of our project. We invite representatives of our federal executive bodies in our discussion. These are representatives of our ministry, the department which is engaged in the promotion of cooperation in Asian Pacific region. These are representatives of research institutes of RANEPA, the academy which kindly provided to us this room, this platform to discuss our projects here. These are representatives from the Higher School of Economics, which is the project office of the Ministry of Economic Development, which prepares and cooperates with us closely in realization of these initiatives. These are representatives of economics, of APEC and innovation clusters, and the representative for one of the countries with which we are interacting in our partnership. In this regard, first I'd like to give the floor to our colleague from the Department of APEC to tell us about the perspective of potential interaction in these countries. For a short presentation, Dmitry Antoyev, you have the floor. My name is Dmitry Antoyev. I'm the head of the project support department in Asia Pacific region. Unfortunately, the director of our department, Natalia Stapran, is not able to take part in this session. I'm going to tell you very briefly about what is Asian and Pacific region, what is the market of this region, and we as the department which has continuous interaction with these markets and dealing with the involvement of the investments. I will tell you what are the success factors, what are the problems in this regard, and then we'll finalize my speech. How can we use Asia Pacific to solve specific problems? Next slide, please. Why the Asian Pacific region is very important is quite clear, because 60% of global GDP is there. Asian Pacific region and economies of APEC are really different from each other, and these are different countries with different level of development and requirements. And the difference from Western countries or from Middle East is that they are opening a window of opportunities for us, for our companies, to enter this region and these markets. And this window of opportunities allows us not only to deal banal export-import operations, but it allows us to work with the APEC countries and economies in the whole spectrum of operating models and businesses, starting from simple business and ending with minority or majority shares in joint ventures and build-own-operate projects, strategic multilateral alliances. So it means the markets are open for us. They're ready to accept our companies. At the same time, we understand that there are three main issues for us as a state to support companies which are willing to work there. First is the need to detect and commercialize technological benefits and advantages, and that's what our colleagues are engaged in from the Department of Innovation. They segregate key technological companies and help them to enter external markets. The second thing is to detect the holders of key technologies and to help them to take the global niche. We understand that this is quite a new notion for the Russian economy, global niches, but there are a few success stories from the West and from regional companies are related to the taking of these niches, taking it and protecting it from different challenges. And finally, promotion and creation of technological alliances. Let's talk a little bit more about technologies. It's clear that the opportunities for the technological companies in APEC means a huge market which is quickly growing. And yes, we got in touch with companies with APEC countries. We understand that there is a very lively interest, a very big interest, not only to Russian energy and the low conversion products, but also to high-tech products and high-tech cooperation. Such projects are very well known, such as cooperation in helicopter construction, aviation construction, aerospace. And when we see a big interest from the part of Japanese consumers to such obviously not very well known areas, such as medical robots, training robots, which are produced in Russia, and not many people know about it. Companies dealing with this region constantly face a number of issues and problems, which we try to resolve together with Ministry of Economic Development. The companies face very fierce competition from the part of Western companies and from the part of regional companies, local companies. The companies from APEC countries, for instance, example of Chinese companies who are already leaders, global leaders in especially in digital economy and digital areas. Now we understand that startups are booming now in the southeastern Asia. For the world, it's not important who's going to invent a new unmanned vehicle, whether it's going to be a team of schoolboys from China or Japan or an institutional department from Russia. A lot of Russian companies face very simple problems of culture and business ethics. The models of interaction which Russian business got used to, especially high-tech business dealing with Western countries, do not work with Eastern countries and Asian countries. Besides that, we see a big problem related to the fact that for Russian companies, regulatory norms and regulations are not known for which are applicable in the region. If by the French law or German law, British law, there are a lot of experts in Russia. There are only a few experts on the experts of Chinese law in Russia. What can be solutions? This is, first of all, involvement of business in the bilateral governmental mechanisms. There are success stories in Russian Federation's government activities in dealing with APEC countries, for instance, cooperation with China or with Japan based on ABA plan, based on technology, and this helps companies to enter Asian markets. This is a very close dialogue, B2B, B2G, between Russian and Asian companies with support of the government and business associations. And finally, creation of regulatory norms, influence on the emerging regulatory norms in Asia using multilateral mechanisms. But we are going to come back to it later. Speaking with companies, we segregated four main strengths which help them to enter Asian market. Four factors which allow the company to state that these are their success story. First, it's their competition, what the company can offer to the Asian market. What's the difference? What's the big difference of their proposition? We took part in the priority projects and in working with clusters and technological companies. And one of the questions we asked them is why Chinese investor has to invest in your cluster and not in the Malaysian cluster or Chad cluster or Brazil cluster, or not to some cluster on the state of Ontario. What's your difference? And Asian countries got used to play all over the world. They are ready to select best products ever. available in the planet. And the competitiveness and the clear understanding competitive advantages is the key. Of course, strategy is the key. It's not possible to enter the market without a strategy. Next, communication. I already told about it. And alliances, strategic partnerships with Asian countries allow to reduce and to mitigate many problems. A good partner can help you to solve a problem. A good partner can make it so to avoid any problem from its occurrence. And companies help each other and Russian partners to create their success stories. What is the difference of the companies? What is the distinguished features of those who failed? Of course, it's the underestimation of the market. Among many Russian companies and many Russian entrepreneurs think that we just have to come to China and China will buy everything. We should just translate our presentation into Chinese and all of a sudden millions of investments will come to us. But that's not true. Especially that's why you should constantly think about your competitive advantages. A lot of problems are related to the bad analysis of the market. We don't have enough companies which understand Asia very well, and that's why the more platforms and multilateral platforms we have, where it's possible to understand not only one country, but 21 countries, or 21 countries can be enlightened, the higher are the chances of the company for a success. Especially lack of state support, because inclusion of any Russian project or company in a list, in a approved document, or signing a contract in the presence of first and top management is a guarantee for success. It means that this partner is reliable. And finally, the lack or deficit of legal understanding and legal knowledge. It all can be solved by creating a big map or corporate strategy. Here you can see one of the examples of a classical corporate strategy. But what's the difference of the Asian and Pacific region from many other potentially important markets, for instance, Southern Asia or Middle East, is that in the Asian Pacific region, the role of supranational regulations is very important. And I think that colleagues, experts, will tell you more about the existing format and what is the supranatural regulations. I'd like to tell you only that now in the multilateral forums in the region, rules are being written which are going to form and shape the regulation of market for the next 10, 15 years. When we studied pharmaceutical market, for example, there is a good Russian company which manufactures innovation vaccines against tuberculosis. And now in APEC, there is a number of projects under development which are aimed at the higher regulation, higher level of regulation of the value-added chain of the company and the supply chain of the company. And so if the company is not able to change the rules of the game in the region, it will face the need to change itself. It means cost, and it is bad for the company. It reduces its profitability, and it can result in the decision of the company not to continue working in Russia. On this slide, I tried to reflect some aspects of such corporate strategy of economic development, or problems or opportunities which can strengthen the position of the company in the market. And first of all, here we see, of course, the acquaintance with the rules of the game, acquaintance with the potential partners and interaction with these partners, and a lot of regulatory issues, and colleagues will tell you more about them a little bit later. And finally, what a company can do at a multilateral platform in APEC environment. Use existing mechanism, of course. There are a lot of mechanisms, and we are glad that Russia starts and launches a lot of mechanisms. We have a number of roadmaps of working with APEC. We have a lot of responsible agencies which can help you to go to this market and start cooperating there. Besides that, it's necessary to take part and launch own projects and take part in existing projects. A wonderful example are two examples which were launched in new markets, and colleagues will tell you more about them. And finally, create the regional agenda, regional regulation, using all these activities. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dmitry, for your most interesting presentation. You mentioned that it is very important for companies to take part in these associations, to take part in forming regulations, to take part in their development, and in fact, APEC Forum is the place where they can do that. Now I would like to give the floor to Tatiana Flegontova. She's the director of the Russian Center for APEC Studies, and she's an expert on this topic. She will give us more details on that. Dear colleagues, good afternoon. I also prepared some slides for you. My presentation will pick up from the topic set out by Dmitry Antoev. I would like to dwell on aspects and speak more about the tools APEC has and the problems that our companies come across entering the markets of Asian-Pacific region. Dmitry has already mentioned these tools, and I would like to speak more about APEC tools available. What actually is APEC? This is a forum that was established back in 1999. Australia was the initiator of this forum. Today, it has 21 members, 21 economies, and Russia joined this organization in 1999. In 2012, for the first time, we became the chairman of this organization. All the working bodies, all the meetings all the events of this forum took place in Russia that year. This is APEC Forum is an incubator of ideas. This is an international platform for discussion. Considering political situation, considering sanction pressure that is now imposed on Russia, it is very important right now to correctly assess how we can promote our ideas considering this political situation. It is especially important to underscore the functions of APEC as a form of economic cooperation where, in fact, we do have a dialogue on economic problems, and it is separated from the politics. It is a possibility to establish dialogue between emerging and developed economies, and here I presented economic blocks that present their interests in terms of APEC agenda. First is Anglo-Saxon bloc, which is often joined by Japan. On the other hand, these are important Asian players such as Russia, China, Japan, Korea, the Asian tigers, the ocean economies, as we usually call them. Two economies from Latin America, Chile, Peru, and Mexico. Papua New Guinea is another economy. This year, in 2018, Papua New Guinea will be, for the first time, a chairman of APEC. Dmitry has already mentioned the special and important role for our campaign and for our company and for Russia in general. APEC is a platform where we can promote economic interests separately from political trends. We segregate the economic aspect here. APEC is a club organization, and that is why it contributes to the reputation and image of our company. As to the architecture of work in APEC, I would like to underscore several important aspects. Very often, we speak about APEC right before concluding meetings, drawing the line under the year, like meetings of leaders and APEC summits. However, the main work is actually performed at the working level, at the level of working committees. We have a task force on investments, an economic task force or committee. We have a number of other working bodies, and there we actually shape the ideas and best practices, the general regulations that are further included into the agenda of our leaders, and they discuss those. Beyond the APEC architecture, we have a consultative meeting for business, consultative council, for business. It assembles several times during the year, and Russian companies have an opportunity to present their interests there. Apart from the Business Consultative Council, the tools of APEC in terms of other areas of work enables us to promote companies' interests within this platform and in Asian Pacific region in general. What are these areas? First is capacity building. Here we exchange experience, enhance transparency, and Dmitry has already mentioned that very often our companies come across difficulties of lack of understanding in terms of regulation in specific countries or within economies of Asian countries. They lack the knowledge on where they can find information on these regulations or where they can find partners for the development of cooperation. APEC fills in for this opportunity. They hold workshops, dialogues they organize meetings between business representatives. They also perform analysis and research in terms of specific issues of regulatory problems. They also focus on legislative regulation and processes, and there you can find information on specific issues in terms of APEC economies. They also develop databases. For example, this year we launched APEC Marketplace. This is a database for small and medium-sized businesses where companies of the region can find all the necessary information that is required to enter the market of a specific country within APEC region. Another set of tools of APEC are recommendations. All the decisions taken within Forum are recommendations. They are not regulations. However, understanding that agreements between economies are fixed at the level of ministers of countries, of course, countries try to perform and deliver according to these agreements and arrangements. APEC holds substantive work in terms of trade and investments. It is voluntary based, and here we shape the overall rules of investment regulations. APEC synchronizes and puts in parallel its agenda with that of OECD and other international agreements. Dmitry also mentioned that regional and multilateral rules that are now formed in terms of investments. We perform significant work, and we work in terms of deep zones of free trade, and here we work on elaborating national regulation, value-added chains, and production chains. Very often these agreements are widely used within various APEC economies. As to business interests, here I tried to single out specific blocks within APEC tools. First is trade liberalization and facilitation. APEC works on developing general standards, lowering tariff and non-tariff limitations. I've already mentioned that APEC decisions are recommendations. However, we have examples when, on one hand, reputation makes countries to deliver according to their obligations. For example, the decision to bring down tariff limitation for environmental products within APEC technologies. This goal was achieved, and all APEC technologies brought down tariffs in terms of trade within this this region. This goal was achieved. Another aspect is of doing business, and I spoke about that already as well. Here we create databases and influence regulations in terms of partnerships within regions. Before we spoke about national protectionism. Right now we tend to speak more about corporate protectionism. Activity of transnational corporations is present not only within one country but in the territory of several partnering countries, and that is why regulating the investments within countries of a region is very important for the effectiveness of business. Number 3, promotion of harmonized regime and elaboration of harmonized regimes. Another block of issues is promotion and advertisement of technologies and goods that companies produce. APEC holds a large number of events. Businesses and various officials take part in these events and fora. There they have an opportunity to present their companies, their products, and which is very important, they present their new standards. It is very important for IT products that do not have standards that they are tailored to globally. Block number 4, capacity building and networking. APEC holds various events in terms of experience exchange. They hold training, seminars, and workshops. Of course, these events are a very good opportunity for networking. This is a good opportunity to meet more companies and representatives of your industry of interest. For a long time, APEC was a platform to solve issues on regional economic integration. However, considering the latest trends in this area, considering that emerging mega-regional agreement, their future is vague as of today. The prospects of the development of Trans-Pacific Partnership, it is vague, and the priorities are also unclear. That is why APEC priorities change correspondingly as well. Here I cite key priorities of 2018 that were outlined by Papua New Guinea. Here they put digital economy as a cornerstone. They mention structural reform, innovations, inclusive component, including closing the digital gap, using digital technologies in traditional industries, conventional industries, and a number of other areas. This year, APEC has already outlined and planned the roadmap for the development of digital technology that take into account the development of physical infrastructure, interoperability of regulations, and they also mention specific technologies this year, and further on we are going to continue to implement this roadmap. A special focus this year will be on innovation component, and here, of course, the cornerstone is the initiatives that were set out by Russia last year, and my colleagues will tell you more about those. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for your presentation. Well, in fact, this is one of the most important topics, and preparing for this panel, we asked Tatiana to tell us more about how business can benefit from this platform. And in fact, regulations, this topic came quite unexpectedly here. One of the companies that works in terms of air navigational equipment and devices entering external market, presenting their products, they were asked, are your products, do your products correspond to international standards? They answered, yes, it does correspond to these standards because we are actually shaping these standards in terms of APEC activities. So it does give an additional potential to export cooperation and international promotion when companies take part in developing these standards. I have one small question that is very important for me. How companies can learn when various events take place in APEC, and when do we need to go to Papua New Guinea in order to shape these new standards next year, for example? Thank you for your question. Well, in fact, you can always address our colleagues from the Ministry of Economic Development, and we as APEC Center also are glad to give you all the information. We have a website with all the contacts. Please address us whenever you need us. Thank you very much. The next block will be actually about the projects that we launch and develop in terms of APEC. But before that, I would like to give the floor to Antonina Levashenko. She's head of Russia OECD Center. In fact, these projects, the projects we are implementing currently, they, of course, are scalable. They are scalable. They can be scaled in OECD countries, and that is what Antonina is going to tell us about. They can be scaled in BRICS and ASEAN countries as well. Antonina, over to you about OECD and our work in terms of this organization. Thank you. Thank you. My name is Antonina Levashenko. I am the head of OECD Center in Broniva. A few words about why we are talking about OECD here. The matter is that 8 of 21 APEC countries are OECD members. OECD is an organization we work with for 10 years already, and their international role, well, in fact, APEC is an incubator of projects, and OECD is an incubator of standards. IMF, the World Bank, and other international organizations, at their website, they mention OECD as a standard developing organization, the organization that produces standards in terms of innovations and this policy. Russia is not an OECD member, but it is part of Committee on Innovation, Industry and Trade, Committees on Investment, and other task forces. 60% of OECD working bodies is attended by Russian representatives. We come there and we take part in the developing of these standards. Russia takes part in this work as a non-member countries, and other 8 APEC countries that are members to OECD do that as members. In my presentation, I have 2 parts. First, well, when we were discussing what to talk about, I decided to speak first about innovative clusters, and the second part is on new markets. In 2012, OECD presented 6 indicators that they use to define the level of development of a cluster. I would like to say right away that innovation clusters, they are regarded by OECD as a potential for regional development. From 2008, they consider them to be the criteria to estimate the opportunity, the possibility to cooperate with the country. And they set out these 6 indicators. First, criteria number 1 is employment. Number 2, economic growth. Then comes profitability. And here I would not like to spend too much time on clusters, but the trend is very interesting. OECD has been studying clusters for 6 years already, and very often the development of cluster does not correspond with the overall economic trend of the region. Sometimes clusters are more stable than the economy of the country in general. For example, the UK and Iceland, their clusters, and the clusters that within their countries were more stable than those of the US, for example. And it means that very often clusters are more stable than national economies. Speaking about the development of innovation clusters within APEC, we can use these 6 indicators for their assessment. We have an elaborated methodology. It is given at OECD website. We do not need to invent anything new. We already have all the tools. We only need to tailor them to our situation. OECD has already assessed 8 innovative clusters, not only of OECD member states. They assessed Brazil, China, and India. APEC for OECD is a special partner. We have a lot of joint agreements between OECD and APEC, and of course they are looking at big economies that are part of APEC.
Next, OECD designed 3 blocks of tools to evaluate clusters. On this slide, in general, we present the content of these tools. First, it's the opportunity to involve partners in this job. How do we involve actors in the cluster? And the best practice, of course, is creating of network clusters. This practice does already exist. The clusters are created between countries, between cities, and both business and institutes and governmental bodies are involved there. And OECD says that network platform is very efficient to gather interested parties in the system. The second is creation of business networks. It can be done in a different way. The question of legal technique, of legal form, first of all, the legal form of agreements. OECD says to establish agreements where it is stated how the information exchange is organized and arranged. And very often we see, for instance, in Russia, the information is not enough about the development. And if we speak about the development of innovation clusters, then it means interaction of different bodies and countries between the creation of a database in international and informational cooperation here. And population with information of the databases provides the administrative framework which cannot be omitted. And finally is commercialization and development of R&D projects themselves. Here, OECD, as a best practice, underlines the closing of agreement between educational institutions of separate countries and the plan of activities determining how we're going to harmonize patent legislation. These are 2 blocks of legislation which are key to develop innovation clusters. The way of getting patents, their potential mutual recognition, and also the regulatory basis. The colleagues already involved regulatory activity, and this is quite a complicated part, but it allows companies to work. If we do not detect these things and just go project by project, there will not be a success in this activity. And the second block of my presentation is devoted to separate aspects, separate innovation cluster priorities and new markets. We should see the trend of last years, and APEC shows this very clearly. We should understand based on which these initiatives were started. The gender budgeting initiative was launched there, and the need to involve more women in entrepreneurship. I'm not speaking from the point that women should work or give work more to women. We speak about the opening of the potential when the working conditions for women are created who can't go to the job while they are raising small children. Very many countries don't provide opportunities for that, and OECD countries say that in this case up to 10% of GDP are lost in different countries if countries don't provide equality in terms of genders. There are a lot of mechanisms how to realize that, and 18 indicators for evaluation. What do we propose? It is shown on the slide. It would be logical, taking into account that OECD tells us that innovation clusters are developing strongly when young companies join them first of all, and clusters first of all develop startups. And the second point, when these clusters provide the access for women to entrepreneurship. And if we make the focus on developing innovation clusters in APEC countries, and if we evaluate indicators in separate countries for these conditions, for these opportunities, we can reveal this potential and we can develop it. Next aspect is Internet of Things. OECD has 15 indicators to evaluate information and telecom technologies. This is the infrastructure which allows to exist for the Internet of Things. What are main moments supporting the development of the Internet of Things? These aspects are the harmonization indicators of APEC countries. First of all, this is the issue of risk-oriented approach to data localization. We know that in our country we have legislation which speaks about total localization of data. OECD says that it does not benefit the development of the Internet of Things, and even China doesn't have the total localization of data, and Russia is really different here with this wonderful law. What can we tell here? The OECD countries also have localization, but in separate sectors, for instance, in healthcare or financial services. The total localization of data is a very big pressure on business. The server, information storage, and governmental control, it's not good. If we want to develop innovation clusters, and if Russia would keep total localization, it will prevent development of Internet of Things and the markets related to it. The second important point is to detect and determine recommendation of Russia, the status of impersonalized data. Now the practice is the following, that people, internet companies, don't understand whether these data should be kept as the personalized data or differently, whether this law is applicable to them or not. In 2010, the regulation was exempt from the law on the storage of data, and some companies are penalized now when they do not abide by this law. It's just a purely legal thing, but it prevents development of internet business and the Internet of Things. And the question of big data, analysis of big data, is a very specific regulatory requirement which can be set in the OECD, in APEC countries. What can benefit to the development of Internet of Things is the question of a single gathering of data, the mechanism of gathering and how we store this data after collection, and then the issue of exchange between the governmental bodies on using confidential channels and secured channels. It allows to develop preventive medicine, for instance, analysis of big data and other areas. As a matter of fact, these are things which can be included in the action plan for communication clusters for APEC countries. Artificial intelligence, next issue. Together with colleagues last year, we attended a workshop on this topic in APEC. APEC says that they are going to develop special tools for artificial intelligence. In other words, they're going to install the definition, what is artificial intellect, what are the risks related to it, what are the regulations to be implemented, and where should it be applied. If we speak about international trade, international relations, practically these are standards for the work of this new market. For the current moment, it would be good for Russia to cooperate with APEC countries and to develop their position on the artificial intelligence. Preempting questions which are asked very often, what Russia has to do with it, since it's not a member of APEC. It's a very positive practice for Russia when Russia, not being a member state, provides good initiatives, and OECD really implements these initiatives. This is a good move from the point of view of Russia to develop the single position for Russia and APEC countries, what risks they see in the artificial intelligence and how they can deal with them. And my favorite topic, the responsible business conduct. There is the tool declaration on foreign investments implemented in 1976. 9 of the 80 countries are members of the declaration. The integral part is the responsible business conduct. It's an integral part of this declaration. This regulation sets the rule of behavior in different spheres, environment, anti-monopoly legislation, and others. What activities companies should implement inside their structures to be in line with environmental standards, competitive policy, and others. You would ask, what is the practical implement? Very simple. 1/3 of international arbitration suits are related to the violations in the business conduct practices. So once again, this is an additional standard which is set in a soft way, soft law, so-called soft law, but this is a basis to provide a suit to the company if it violates it, because it's an international standard. Russia is not a member of this document, but we have a positive moment. Last year, the government gave an instruction to join this declaration, and now the activity plan is being developed to join this declaration. But to join it is one thing. It means that we're going to abide by international laws. But OECD moves on, and starting from the year 2000, industrial regulations for business conduct are being implemented. For instance, China last year, and not being a member of OECD, it brought its regulation for business conduct in the area of cobalt production. So China will set standards for cobalt production on this platform, and the companies which will not observe these standards, they will be removed from the market of cobalt. If we speak about innovation clusters, if we speak about the Internet of Things, and so on, why Russia shouldn't, together with some other APEC countries, to be initiator of a regulation in the area of digital economy. There are a lot of aspects related to data storage. What is personal data? How can we or should we make data analysis and other things? What should be the load on the informational intermediary? There are a lot of regulatory things which can be harmonized and make a joint document. We voiced it for the Ministry of IT and Telecom, but this ministry didn't give it positive feedback. Now we provide it here on this platform. It could be a good standard designed by 9 OECD members, and Russia could join this group and could design the new standard for digital economy on this platform. Tatiana asked me not to say a word about crypto economy. I will say only one thing. Let's think that 9 of 21 OECD countries already introduced the regulation in cyber countries, cyber economy. Cryptocurrencies are being developed now. Japan already recognize it as a means of payments because it increases the competitiveness of different countries in terms of the speed of payments. This market is not being mentioned officially in international platforms, but this is the future. And if there will be a cooperation with APEC in terms of standards, it would help not to create competition within this platform. Thank you very much, Antonina. We heard you. We heard your inputs, and as a matter of fact, the artificial intelligence topic is being discussed on many platforms. We have national champions. These are companies among top 3 or 4 companies producing such products related to artificial intelligence. This is the company APEC, artificial vision and text processing Yandex with Alice, and the Center of Technologies with voice recognition tools. So I think for our companies, this topic would be really interesting. You told us a lot about developing of innovation clusters, and in work group 50 on innovations, which happened last year within OECD, and the topic of clusterization was announced as one of the most promising and successful and efficient topics. In this regard, we are beginning the second part of our roundtable with the presentation of projects, and I'd like to give the floor to Ekaterina Slankina, representative of the Institute of Statistical Studies and Economies of Knowledge, HSC University, who will present us the project on the support of cooperation within innovation clusters. I'd like to draw your attention that this is a project, this is a draft project, and everything what you are going to see can be criticized and can be improved. So please, your comments are welcome on this. And I'd like to draw your attention to the fact that these materials will be in English. They are intentionally prepared in English because all these materials will be then handed over to APEC to support our initiatives. Ekaterina, you have the floor. Thank you very much, Nikita. Good afternoon to your colleagues. I'm really glad to have a speech here on the Gaidar Forum, and if you allow, I'd like to express my gratitude to RANEPA, which is the host of this platform, and our partner, our good partner in realization of APEC initiatives. Dear colleagues, thank you very much for your support and cooperation. My presentation will have three parts. I'll start with the brief introduction, and then in brief I tell you about the content of the initiative, and then I will present the draft plan on implementation of the initiatives, which we are going to fine-tune and to agree upon with other partners from the Ministry of Economics. I represent the Russian Cluster Observatory. Our department is specializing on making studies of regional policy clusters and innovations. We also are leading expert and analytical work, providing methodological support to clusters and governmental bodies. We have a lot of areas of projects, and one of the strategic and priorities for us is the map of clusters of Russia. It's an open interactive database about clusters across the whole country. Clusters can create free of charge their profile, populated with information about participants, about their specialization, products, projects, documents, regulatory acts. And the main value here is the additional attention from the part of governmental bodies and a very valuable database. And when we received an information from the Ministry of Economic Development to take part in the development of the initiative of international cooperation in clusters on APEC area, we were really glad to be able to scale out our developments in the area of the support of this cooperation. At the same time, we proceeded from the up-to-date agenda of cluster development in our country, and Nikita already mentioned in brief this point. I'd like to repeat a little bit. Cluster policies started to be developed in Russia from 2008 by the efforts of Ministry of Economic Development. Further on, Ministry of Trade joined this endeavor. And for the last 10 years, we realized quite a lot of projects in this regard. In 2016, the ministry reached the new level of clusterization by launching the project on supporting innovation clusters of leaders, of leaders in the global level, on the global level, by creating the advanced points of growth, support of technology transfer, and development of intra-cluster cooperation. For now, in our country, we have 12 clusters, leading clusters selected, and as we can see from this slide, they are developing their cooperation very actively abroad and internationally, and they work with the APEC economies. Then we designed an initiative the point of which is to design mechanism for international cooperation between clusters. While preparing this initiative, we proceeded from the fact that clusters play a very important role in many economies of the region. Our preliminary studies showed that, for example, in Russia, the export revenue and the production of innovative products is higher by 20 and 70% by basin regions, respectively. The US statistics shows that clusters provide more than 1/3 of employment, 1/2 of revenue, and almost 100% of patents in the national economy. Similar data are available for South Korea. It accounts for 70% of production and export and almost 1/2 of employment. In 2016, for instance, in Canada, the government decided to launch national supporting program for clusters, and the same happened in Australia on the initiative of the private association. This is our first message, first thesis. Amid the global economy, the relations between clusters become more important. This is looking for investors, expanding of markets, inclusion in international networks, and development of different research and development platforms. At the same time, as we saw in our preliminary study in APEC economies, there is no single uniform approach to cluster policy without talking about the basic statistic information on this matter. And they work a lot on this. In 2009, an interesting study was made where APEC was compared to a global cluster. I would like to come back to this initiative in the area of Russian economy. The initiative is planned for 3 years, and it was approved in May on the committee in Hanoi, and we got support from Chinese colleagues, and many thanks for that. And within our roundtable, we basically make the first event which is planned within this initiative.
Namely, we will present the draft structure of actions that is planned for clusters of APEC economies. This is the first version of the document. We are going to further elaborate it, and of course we will be interested in the opinion of the professional community. Now I would like to give you the main stages and steps of this plan, and I will actually reveal the content of this initiative. The document was developed according to one of the priorities of APEC for 2018, and it was focused on enhancing cohesion and enhancing the regional economic integration. The next block is our goals for 2025. We define it as creating a strong professional cluster community at APEC space that will develop the cooperation between businesses, research and educational organizations, governmental bodies, and other organizations working in the sphere, in the area of economy and technology. Further steps. In the prerequisites, we highlighted the information vacuum. So first we need to gather information on regions. We're going to use open sources of information in order to understand more about APEC economies clusters, how we can integrate them, what we can include into our cluster policy in case we are going to formalize it. And finally, we are going to run a survey for APEC economies representatives in order to enhance the cooperation between clusters of economies. The purpose of this survey will be to identify the existing level of international communication between clusters, including priorities in terms of geographical areas and industries, purposes, internationalization mechanisms, coordination mechanisms, and ways to overcome these barriers. Further on, we are going to prepare a report on APEC clusters and their international cooperation. This will help to bring down lack of information, and it will build a platform to organize first database and further accumulate content on APEC clusters. Next, we're going to spread best practices and experience in terms of clusters development of their international cooperation. And for that purpose, we're going to run workshops. And finally, in order to reach our global goal, we are going to develop an interactive cluster platform that will, on one hand, become a platform for cooperation for regional clusters, and it will be a database on activities. In terms of implementation of this initiative, we are going to work more with international organizations like DCN Network, OECD, the European Platform on Intercluster Cooperation, and it was very interesting for me to listen to Antonina's presentation. I'm actually very grateful to her for this valuable information, and I hope that our workshops and our joint events will enrich each other in terms of information. Finally, block number 4, it is about monitoring, evaluation and review. We're going to perform an annual and interim monitoring. The interim will be performed by 2020. Officials that are going to run this monitoring will define, the list of these officials will be defined after consultations with partners. And of course, it is important to set KPIs. KPIs should not be numerous or too complicated here. The most important property of these KPIs is verification, an ability to be verified. They may be number of participants to a survey, number of participants registered within a platform, and, well, these are main outlines of our plan. The specific content of this plan will be defined by consultation, but of course I will be very grateful to you for all your ideas and comments. Thank you. Thank you very much. The next presentation will be given by Galina Sergeyeva. She will tell us about an initiative on coordination of policies in terms of the development of technological markets of the future. The basis is the National Technological Initiative that we will talk about more further on. The development and spread of new technologies that are convergent is actually sort of a combination of various technical areas like eco-T, biotechnologies and nanotechnologies. Usually it provokes significant changes in terms of human activity and changes to science, production processes, and economy in general. Switching to the new economic order will bring to life new markets, and there consumers will be offered new goods and new services. First of all, it is related to unmanned vehicles, road infrastructure like smart road infrastructure, artificial neuron networks, decentralized power and facilities, cyber system, breakthrough state-of-art technologies, and many more technologies. New technologies that come on stage combined with new regulation systems and new standardization and quality management systems, considering various attitude to the results of application of these technologies, attitude to risks that may be provoked by the application of these technologies, all that calls for new standards to be developed. We need new norms and we need to harmonize these regulatory systems. This actually prompted us to develop and present this initiative, an initiative of new markets development. We considered that in APEC region, we need to enhance and intensify international relations, multilateral relations, and relations between various companies. Despite the fact that in APEC we hold extensive work on establishing various communications, on development and harmonizing regulatory tools, in our point of view, it is still not enough. We need a mechanism that would enable companies to find partners online, to communicate online easily, and to find differences, for example, in terms of patenting systems, licensing systems. We need to enable them to find easier formats of obtaining patents, or, for example, organize meetings or sell products, obtain licenses for their products, make agreements and contracts between companies. All these issues were the basis and the reasons why we set out on developing this initiative. At the national level, all APEC technologies have either initiatives or programs that are aimed on supporting the development of new technologies, namely in China. In China, for example, there is a national program on modern technologies and development. This is a comprehensive program that includes over 1,000 smaller programs that are distributed across various technological areas. This program is implemented on the basis of a plan, a state plan, that was developed for state-of-the-art technologies, IT technologies. In the US, we know there also are various initiatives supporting IT technologies development, nano initiatives that are in force from 2012, a biotech initiative that is in force from 2001. Recently, they adopted a pilot program. It is called Digital Attaché. This program, this software, provides American companies with an access to the digital space, and it gives them an opportunity to freely communicate with various companies in the world, the companies that these companies are interested in. They also announced a program on digital economy of the U.S. It focuses on state support and the development of new technologies, and on the companies that developed these technologies in the U.S. In Russia, as we already mentioned, we have a National Technological Initiative, NTI. Its purpose is to build capacity in terms of new technological markets development in Russia and provide a way to access new markets, to attract more talents, scientists, to the new technologies areas. This program supports national champions, companies that are operating in the area of high-level and IT technologies. Initiatives like the ones mentioned are present in all APEC economies, except for Papua New Guinea, probably. Our initiative is to bring together the efforts of national initiatives, programs, in order to obtain an effect of synergy from IT technologies, development of cooperation programs, development and implementation of research projects, transfer of technologies, trade in IT products. We are running out of time, unfortunately. I would like to mention that it is important to look at the documents of developed countries. It is important to look at their plan of proceeding in terms of national technological initiatives. And in fact, let's take as an example the technology which is related to using sensors in robotics. This is a part of a big program in terms of digital economy program. This is part to national technological initiatives. We mention it in all the framework documents, but unfortunately we do not have a strategy on developing robotics in Russia in general. And when we ran this survey, we understood that this is an area to be developed. In terms of the programs of the digital economy, the 4 roadmaps that were adopted at the end of the previous year, one of roadmap on regulation, another on infrastructure, one on security, and number 4 on technological startups. Considering our time frame right now, I would like to give the floor to the next speaker, Alexander Stepanov. He will tell us about another project on benchmarking for programs on supporting rapidly growing high-tech APEC companies. A prototype of this program is actually the National Champion program under the Ministry of the Economic Development of Russia. Alexander, over to you. Thank you. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. We do not have a lot of time, right? Yeah, unfortunately, 10 minutes maximum. Okay, thanks. I will be talking about rapidly developing companies. And, well, heavily we will cover all these topics. At the end of the previous year, we had actually, we saw a very good event. Russia obtained a right to run a workshop, a seminar on rapidly growing innovative company. This project was supported by APEC. It was supported in terms of one of APEC forums and Committee on Science and Innovation, and APEC decided to finance this program. Russia will also support this program, and hopefully in May or June we will have a very interesting international event. In order to tell you more about that, I need to give you an introduction and tell you more about what actually are these rapidly growing companies, gazelles as we call them sometimes. In fact, this story about rapidly growing companies, gazelles, this topic drew attention of researchers back in the 80s of the last century. David Birch, a well-known researcher, introduced the term gazelles, gazelle companies. In his paper, where he used this term, for the first time, he actually created the whole zoo. He has elephants, mice, and gazelles, rapidly developing companies, those that are growing fast. On the slide, you can see some of them mentioned. There are specific criteria of these companies that are presented on the slide. These companies actually play a big role providing new jobs. There are data, we have data that approximately 4% of American companies give 70% of new jobs.
Growth of revenue, this is one of the main criteria. It's 20% each year within 4 years. And speaking about other specific features of these gazelle companies, first, these companies have to be young, but the research shows that it's not true. It's important to underline that these are not young companies and far from being very young. They are not startups. 70% of British fast-growing companies are in the age of 5 years and more, based on the data of 10 years and older. The same situation in the US. The most dynamic US companies are of the age of 25 and more years. So practically this data challenge the opinion, the standpoint which has been traditional for some time, that the developing institutions propose to support, first of all, startups and young companies. Another message which has been amended was that such companies are normally high-tech companies, but that's not true again. They are not not only not high-tech, but they exist basically in all industries, in all sectors, and nevertheless they are normally innovative. They not necessarily work in high-tech industries, but they broadly use in their operations innovations. They broadly use innovations in their activities. The average share spent for R&D is as double as in other companies. Another model which needs to be discussed is the alternative model of analysis of fast-growing companies, is the ulterior champions concept. The author of this is German consultant and businessman, is German Simon. These are more stable, fast-growing companies Here he studied it on the material of German and German-speaking countries, and later on he found same companies in other countries in the US, and such companies are also found in Russia. These are normally family companies, companies which work in the market for quite a long time, some of them more than 100 years. They have long, successful business stories, and they get the majority of revenue from export. How they occur, emerge, and how are they working? Initially, they take just a narrow niche. They sell some blades for propellers or for engines. Afterwards, they become leaders in this narrow niche of competence, and then step by step they expand their activities, taking up adjacent areas, and are becoming technology leaders, at the same time becoming export leaders. These are the interesting companies. So what are we talking about when we're discussing today fast-growing companies? The term gazelles, birch gazelles, was evolutioning, and we can give or use some description, and you can see it on the screen. These are companies, high growth, innovative firms, which are growing annually on average by 20%, and they are growing with this pace for 3 and more years. To cut off smaller companies, there is a criteria that they have to have 10 or more employers in the beginning of the accounting period. That's the definition we are using. It is based on the definition of SCD, and we added innovativeness here, because we speak not only about fast-growing, but also about innovative companies, underlining this criteria. Next thing we should take into consideration, and I'm going closer to the topic of our seminar, are the programs of support for the growing business which are available in APEC countries. You can see the list of countries which have the programs. These programs, there are interesting programs in Malaysia, for instance. Practically all these programs implement periodical or annual selection of new players, of new participants, which have export orientation. In particular, Malaysian programs, for instance, MITAYA program. The purpose of the program is to increase the volume of export by participants by 50% by the year of 2035. Interesting examples from Canada. There are 2 programs, one of which has been, they're both in Quebec, by the way, in Quebec province, and the first one was launched by the government. The second one is the private one, which is carried out by a consortium, one of the Quebec consulting companies. A very interesting case in Korea. The first from World Class 300. As a result, there has to be more than 300. They studied it for a long time, and the first participants of this program provide very good result. First result from they increased their sales by 22%. In 2013, they launched Next Global Champion in Korea, and the goal of this program is to achieve 100 million revenue for each participant and to become leader in their respective niches. understanding of the importance of this part of the business and the support of this business has come to our country too. And thanks to the efforts of the Ministry of Economic Development, it was possible to launch an interesting program which is called High Growth Tech Companies Program. It has a longer name in Russian, support of private high technological companies leaders, or shortly described as national leaders. The priority program was launched in 2016. Now it has already 62 companies. There were 2 selection stages. 2 groups of companies have been selected. It's too early to show some results, serious results, but nevertheless the program is going on successfully. The companies are being selected by the growth of export, by number of new products, by share of R&D in cost, by the level of cost for innovations, technologies, and so on and so forth. Summing up this topic, we can state that the typical recommendations given within these programs are, first of all, selective support of companies within and taking into account the specifics of the industry, technology, and support of on the individual level, what we can call concierge service, when each company is specifically known in the organization which is supervising the program. It enjoys the individual approach. The company can call an individual manager and consult on any issues. This is the approach which is provided by the ministry. Thank you, Alexander. You mentioned us, and we remember the time. I have only one question. Have you analyzed, is there any direct financial support for these companies? Maybe in dollars? What is the approximate volume? Or you don't have it? You mean the foreign program? No. As a rule, I can't tell you for sure that there is always a support, but as a rule, the direct financial support is not provided by the state or governmental bodies. They take the measures which I mentioned. This is mentorship, measures to improve qualifications and learning of top managers and owners of these companies, a proactive support in strategies, because during the active growth, these companies, of course, have higher risks, and they get help in terms of amending their strategies and this consulting. It's very pleasant to hear that our project is developing according to the best practices from all over the world. Funding is not provided, but targeted support and consulting is provided. If you allow, I'd like to give the floor to Irina Grigorenko, project manager of Agency of Strategic Initiatives, ideologist of the National Strategic Initiatives of the Russian Federation. She will share with us the insights, how we are going to proceed within this initiative and what can we offer to global players in this regard. Thank you very much, Nikita, for your introduction. I will tell you about the Russian approach of creating high-tech markets, national technological initiative. And first of all, I'd like to underline the importance of today's discussion and the initiatives which has been brought up within APEC agenda, because amid the global technological revolution for state economies, it's very important to develop their own national strategies, taking into account the use of competitive advantages which we receive from the technology development and mitigation of potential threats. In this regard, the priority in Russia is given to the maximum leverage of technologies, and it is fixed on the megatrend level, and one of the key tools of implementation is the National Technological Initiative. It was initially announced by the President in the end of 2014 as a long-term program of development, which on the horizon of 2035 will create in Russia new high-tech industries and would allow Russian companies to take bigger share in global markets in these specific areas. For the current moment, there are 11 markets of this kind, NTA, so-called nets, which are selected by very strict criteria, which you can see on this slide. The ending is net. In the name of each market underlines its network structure and flexibility as a network of fast-growing companies which are able to react to the consumer trends. And it is assumed that in the horizon of 2035, the amount of the high-tech business, the volume of the high-tech business will take up to 50% of the Russian economy versus 5% of high-tech economy which we have now, and which is represented mostly by the IT sector. What are the markets selected as priorities? As unmanned transport and services based on this unmanned transport, Aeronet, Marinet, Autonet, personalized medicine, HealthNet, Neuro-PC interfaces, neurotechnologies, NeuroNet, distributed security services, SafeNet, traditional financial services, FinNet, personalized production and catering, FoodNet, market for augmented reality, MediaNet, and high-tech market mode FashionNet. And around these high-tech markets, the main work is done in NTI by developing and realization of specific roadmaps. And the main stake is made on business, which will demonstrate the high ability not only for creation of high-tech products, but also for use of new management models. And in this sense, NTI creates PPP mechanisms when the high-tech business in the dialogue with the government formulates the national agenda for high-tech development, formulates requests for research and development, for talents and supported services. At the same time, the role of the state is in providing maximum support to the business working in a high-tech segment, and the approach to this task is disclosed through the metrics, through our management tool, which allows to prioritize any projects and programs within NTI. You can see these metrics on the slide. It combines economic logic on the left with the logic of the scientific development and technological development on the top of the metrics, end-to-end NTI technologies, development of education and talents on the right, NTI talents, and supporting governmental and non-governmental services on the bottom. And especially this comprehensive approach to the technological development differs NTI from other similar programs. If we take technological priorities and scientific areas, in NTI a list is set containing 10 end-to-end technologies, such technologies as big data, artificial intelligence, distributed register system, quantum technologies, and others. In 2017, a work was launched on creation of national technological initiative centers based on the organization of higher education and scientific organizations in 6 end-to-end technologies of NTI. The winners of competitions were made, and for 4 other technologies, the winners will be identified in 2018. The logic of the work of the centers will be based on the logic of overcoming barriers for each of the end-to-end technologies, and for work in consortium with market leaders who will formulate the request for technological development and evaluate perspective of commercialization of scientific solutions. In the logic of overcoming technological barriers, we also carry out technological competitions where a task is set for technological teams and grants are provided One of the latest competitions were aimed at the creation of systems of unmanned piloting in bad weather conditions and road conditions, which is quite relevant for Russian specifics. Besides that, in the technological area, there is a cross-market, cross-industrial area, TechNet for advanced production technologies. And for this area, there is a roadmap developed and approved, implementing creation of smart future factories, which will produce products for every NTI market. That's why it has a cross-functional character. If we take the business models of NTI, for the current moment, there is a number of mechanisms for supporting businesses, in particular high-tech businesses. And the question is to fine-tune these mechanisms and to provide efficient operation. So it is provided to use the breakthrough, the end-to-end growing mechanism for global champions, starting from the business idea and up to the national leader and global leader stages. In this regard, it will be very important to provide comfortable legal environment, and in the key areas of NTI, roadmaps are being designed and approved to improve legislation. A very important aspect in this work is creation of so-called regulatory sandboxes to test new products and new approaches.
From the point of view of human capital development, here NTI provides several mechanisms that cover various age categories, and these mechanisms identify and develop talents. We have a system of intellectual contests in terms of relevant areas. We call them NTI Olympiads, and the winners of these contests, they have a right to be admitted to be accepted to leading universities of the country without taking entrance exams. They have an opportunity of early vocational training. There are areas that provide training for super engineers of the future. We have a network of technoparks for children, and we call them quantoriums, and their children solve various technological and scientific tasks. One of the main directions here is training of technological leaders of technological companies and R&Ds. We train talented students that are potential startup founders. In order to implement this task, in 2018 we launched an NTI platform which is called University 2035. Its key principles are network organization by means of combining offline formats that are provided by various educational institutions and creating a personal trajectory, personal track of development and education for every student. This will give us, in the time frame of 5 years, the training for approximately 10,000 leaders across the country. And above that, online training courses that use end-to-end technologies. They will enable us to use these technologies over 10,000 users. Sorry for interrupting you. We have 2 more speakers and really little time. Oh, this is the most interesting slide. Yes. In fact, the development of technologies, this task cannot be solved by one technology. That is why we've identified 5 areas for us. We join various technologies, forecasts, and foresights of our development. And, well, 1 year ago, we joined Global Foresight Organizations Network movement. This is a closed expert network that unites developers of technological foresights in various countries. This is a very good analytical base in terms of technological development program. For us, this is a very good benchmark for the quality of our accelerating new formats in terms of NTI. Next block is coordination of national technological policy, then national and technological cooperation, and here NTI competence centers that I mentioned. They will provide for international cooperation in terms of this area. Then building global value-added chains and business cooperation. And another important area is working to create technological standards that are either underdeveloped in terms of market or absent at all. Well, thank you. I see several areas to improve our initiative. First possibility is time frame. You calculated your initiative up to 2025. We have a shorter horizon, and another interesting topic is foresights. We can scale it up in terms of APEC market. We should do it. Thank you very much. The next speaker is Anatoly Sotnikov. He's the General Director of Agency of Innovation Development from the Innovative Development Cluster from Kaluga region. In fact, we are very much interested in your cluster because this is a leading cluster in terms of our project, and it is the leader in terms of European benchmarking. They won a silver medal, a silver certificate, right? Thanks. Thank you for an opportunity to represent constituents and regions of Russian Federation that these programs are addressed to. Hopefully we will be able to use this opportunity. Unfortunately, my slides are in Russian, but I will be brief in my presentation, so I hope you will forgive my Russian slides. We have 6 clusters, in fact, but I selected 5 those that are related to innovative activity. Pharmaceuticals, biotech, and biomed cluster. There we have a lot of pilot projects, and our leaders, they actually won the silver certificates of the European initiative cluster. The nuclear cluster is the youngest and the most active one. As to technologies, well, first 2 actually are related to personalized, individualized medicine, and there they use 2 more participants of clusters. Microsources for brachytherapy. This is not a new technology, but at the same time, it is unique, as this is a new technology to create these sources, and at the same time, they are cheaper comparing to those that are now bought in Germany and used. One of the sources has a size of a seed, and these seeds are introduced today as a brachytherapy. They introduce this seed into the tumor, and it kills it by means of radioactive radiation. They are produced in our Physical and Chemical Institute, and they're in Sablent in the Physics and Energy Institute. They were clinically tested on the basis of the National Research Medical Center radiology. Today, we finalize the procedures in terms of obtaining certificates, permits, and other documents. In terms of thermal tests, in terms of clinical tests, we tested them for 200 patients, and in fact, those devices that are now used bought in Germany, they cost 100 euros per 1 seed. Today, the Physics and Technology Institute sell these seeds to us 40 euros per seed, and if they launch serious production, it will be 25 euros per seed. As to the market capacity, unfortunately, every year we identify 200,000 patients that are prescribed with this kind of therapy, and we need approximately, currently we need approximately 600,000 emitters. Considering the saving capacity of this technology, it may be introduced both in terms of Eurozec and APEC, considering that our patients cannot afford more expensive seeds. Project number 2. We actually have already gone beyond what is presented at the slide. This technology is used in proton medicine. Protons can kill malignant tumors without capturing the tissues beyond the tumor. This development is called Prometheus. It was developed in Serpukhov, and in fact, this device is in Serpukhov, in the Center of Radiology, and but the device itself cannot do anything itself. However, we installed this device in a medical center. We tested this therapy at 100 patients, and the results are 100% successful. This is a high-tech technology, and it has a very low cost. Siemens cyclotrons in St. Petersburg last year, the construction of this cyclotron spent 7 billion rubles, and another one costs 19 billion rubles. However, they are not yet launched, and we do not have results. Well, speaking about personalized healthcare, personalized medical services, for every patient, we individualize the amount of treatment, the parameters of therapy that we offer, and in fact, that speaks about the individualization capacity of these technologies. Another cluster is operating in terms of aeronavigational devices and constructions. This is not an unmanned aircraft. This is a manned flying device. And, well, basically this cluster is tailored for civil aviation and aerospace cluster. This is designed for hot climate, and a pilot will be comfortable inside this aircraft, even in a hot environment. This is a light aircraft. Its wingspan is only 7 meters, and it is able to treat 160 hectares of area within a very short period of time. Thank you, Anatoly. In fact, it is very interesting. It is probably my fault that we are beyond the time frame. Unfortunately, we have just time for a wrap-up phrase, and we need to give the floor to the next speaker. Okay, then the last slide. Our nuclear cluster has completed a unique event. It was called Nuclear Hackathon. It was launched in terms of the development of power tanks for households. Our graduates and students were working at this problem for several hours in a row, and the results were stunning. The center picked up these results, and hopefully within 2 or 3 years we will get a unique power tank energy accumulating device. Thank you very much. It was very interesting. These are breakthrough technologies. The next speaker is Xian Zhan, Deputy Director from Cooperation Division, China National Institute. He will tell us about how we can protect companies when they enter the new market. Thank you very much. It is very difficult to be the last person to speak because all the audience actually wants you to finish this panel finally, but I will try to give you something interesting. I mentioned that every speaker mentioned China, in fact. It is very interesting. Before coming here, well, it is very sad that I'm the only representative of China here, but right before coming here, I took part in a similar discussion. We have a lot of scientists, and we discuss a lot cooperation with Russia, but this discussion was not attended by Russians, so this is like an unrequited love. So we love each other quietly without saying that in the face of each other. So we discussed integration, innovation, and technology. All that is very important. Colleagues mentioned that many times, and I'm not going to repeat all that. Russia is a great power. It has modern technologies. However, we are living in the digital era. We use applications and internet extensively. Everything, all the projects are related to the internet. Russia possesses high-level technologies. All the products, considering integration and innovation and high-tech, all these technologies focus on adding value. Technologies reshape the world. In 2018 in China, in Shanghai, there will be an expert exhibition. It is organized by the commercial community of China and your partners. Technologies are in fact products, and they should be presented and exhibited. Maybe you will find a lot of interesting things there. As to our center, I would like to present it as well. Our center was established under the initiative by Xi Jinping, and it was endorsed by the Charter of SCO. We were to organize a platform and give opportunities to train legal professionals. Our colleagues said that we need experts who would master the regulations and the language. However, it takes time to train professionals. After 4 years, our center was established. We are operating already. And, well, I do not know the exact area of our facilities, but it is vast. We have 300 rooms. And we have also conference facilities. We are able to organize conferences like this one. In fact, this morning, using a beamer, together with the deputy head of the university, we actually discussed the possibility of organizing a similar workshop. We basically fell in love with each other, but unfortunately we do not meet each other too often. But I think we need to enhance our cooperation to enable our businesses, our advocates, our legal professionals and professors to meet each other more often. I'm also a coordinator of the Ministry of Justice of China, and I'm the Deputy Minister for SEO. For several years, I've been taking part in the decision-making process, and our country has already launched this initiative. We established a committee on legal services, legal support for businesses. In general, we offer consulting services. What does it mean? It means that we bring things to order. We establish rules. We explain entrepreneurs where to go and how to go there. I think that it is very important for us to work in the environment of understanding without any conflicts. Of course, this is an idealistic picture. It is not achievable, but we can reduce the number of conflicts and misunderstandings using this platform. That is why it is very important, it is very good that last year in October on the 5th meeting all the parties endorsed this initiative. We established a working group for SEO procedures. An interagency working group was endorsed by this meeting. And it means that the results of the work of this working group will be approved by the head of the state. We will continue providing consultancies, and we obtained financing for this activity. Our idea is to invite legal professionals for small and medium-sized businesses that do not have in-house legal professionals. We will invite legal professionals that will provide them with this kind of services. We also invite legal experts that are experienced in terms of relationships with China to join this program. If they have experience of cooperating with China, well, we will organize all the logistics and all the organizational issues with the Ministry of Economic Development and the Customs Service, and we can discuss various issues. We are even ready to compensate the costs and expenses. Thank you very much. Let us wrap up our session.
We have very close cooperation and relations with China, and just last year we had the first dialogue on innovations with the Ministry of Innovations and Technology of China, and the communication event which you mentioned, we will be glad to invite you to speak within the second dialogue which will happen this year. We will stay in touch, and if you have an opportunity to invite also representatives from the companies which we want to cooperate. So thank you very much to you. I think that the legal support, without the support of the economic ministry, is not possible, and together with you, we can proceed in this direction. Many thanks. Thank you very much for your participation, dear colleagues. Unfortunately, we don't have time for discussions, but we are all open for the dialogue, and this project is really important. And if you're interested, please contact us. We will be glad for any interaction and cooperation. Thank you.